Good, good, good morning. My name is Councillor Anthony Kelly. Welcome to today's hearing. I shall be chairing today's meeting. I have Councillor Donnelly and Councillor Sumner, and we comprise today's committee. Please note that Councillor Donnelly is substituting for Councillor Praveen Anand. We have Cornelia Clark, who is clerk for the subcommittee and will be minuting the meeting. There may be another Democratic Services officer present. We also have Alison Love, who is legal advisor to the subcommittee, and Anjali Garcha, licensing process team leader, and she will introduce the report. In accordance with procedure, I shall invite the licensing officer to introduce the report and provide any clarification on factual issues. Then I'll invite the applicant to present the application, answer any questions and call any witnesses. Invite those who've made representations, objections to make their representations, answer any questions and call any witnesses. At the conclusion of the hearing, the subcommittee, accompanied by the legal advisor and the committee Democratic Services officer, will retire to consider its decision. The decision will be given at the end of the meeting at approximately 12:30, perhaps, depending on how proceedings go, and confirmed in writing within 5 working days. If the panel are unable to make a decision, you'll be notified in writing within 5 working days of the panel's decision. Anjali, I will go around the room once Anjali presents the report so I can get clarification on who's who then. Thank you.
Okay, so the application before yourselves today is that Mr. Kirshan Thangamani has made an application to vary a premises license to specify an individual as the designated premises supervisor for the premises license under Section 37 of the Licensing Act 2003. The application was to vary the license to specify himself, Mr. Kirshan Thangamani, as the DPS. The application was received by ourselves on the 27th of January. The application takes an immediate effect upon its successful submission until such time the matter is determined. The police had the right to object to that variation, and we received an objection from PC Vicky Hewson, who's the licensing officer of the Metropolitan Police Service. She submitted an objection notice against this application on behalf of the Chief Officer of the Metropolitan Police, and copies of the actual application and the police objection are before yourselves today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thangamani, you are the applicant. Do you have any representative here with you today, sir?
Forgive me, Chair, I did it again. One day I'm going to start talking and my microphone's going to be on.
You had £1 for every time that happened. Yeah.
Chair, good morning. I'm here to represent the applicant, Mr. Thangamani. Thank you.
That's absolutely fine, Mr. Craig, but we don't have anything in writing to say that. So I really would like to, I would, and I believe you, absolutely. But I want Mr. Kirshan to tell us who's representing him today. My question was to him.
Very well.
Yeah.
Hi, Councillor. Yep. So Mr. Duncan Craig will be representing me today.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's great. If you want to mute your mic again, Mr. Thank
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, apologies that you weren't notified. I don't know why that's the case, but I'm sorry that's not happened.
Yeah. Okay. So just going briefly around the room, we've got Anjali, Alison, Councillors Donnelly, Mr. Craig, and we've got PC Vicky Hewson, and we've got PC Kerry James. So I would like to invite Mr. Craig to present his application to the panel. Thank you.
Chair, I'm very grateful. Thank you. Mr. Thangamani, a slightly unusual set of circumstances here, and I'll give you the chronology, the narrative first, before turning to him, and then perhaps dealing a little with the circumstances and the law. But what happened was Mr. Thangamani applied for a premises license, which was granted by your licensing authority, by you as a subcommittee, on the 6th of May of 2020. Some conditions were imposed as a consequence of that. No fault of Mr. Thangamani. I think it's right. I'm here to represent his best interests. There was some issues with regards to the application in the first place. What frequently happens with frequently is a bit strong actually, but what can happen with some frequency with an application is, for various reasons, a DPS, when an application for the grant of a premises license is submitted, sometimes the DPS is not nominated on there. There's no reason why that's any inherently wrong. Sometimes it's because a premises doesn't have anybody available at that time, but it expects to, maybe they're in the process of recruiting, for example, but they want to apply for a license. Sometimes applicants will speculatively apply for a license before they enter into that process. But sometimes, and I do encounter this 2 or 3 times a year, it's simply because the individual who is proposed to be the DPS has done the course, has got a decent DBS. It's just he's in the process of applying for a personal license, and the personal license process can take some considerable time, especially at the moment, because my dealings with licensing authorities up and down the country is, because there's a physical license, a card that needs to be sent out, that can delay the process, because a lot of licensing authorities are working remotely at the moment. I know at Birmingham, they have to send somebody in once a week to the office, a thankless task and a lonely task, I would suggest, in order to deal with that. So look, I'm certainly no criticism of Ealing Council in that regard. Just simply that Mr. Thangamani was not a holder of a license at that time, and he instructed an agent to undertake that work for him. And then it became apparent that, in actual fact, there wasn't a DPS on the premises. There's no secret about that, and that's clearly, there's been no efforts to prosecute him for that, and that's right, because for any offence under the Licensing Act, under Section 136, there's a due diligence defence, which allows for when someone's done everything they reasonably can. And certainly, my advice to anyone in those circumstances would be: look, you've employed an agent. As far as you're concerned, you're on as the DPS. You've done nothing wrong, and so that's where he found himself. There was then an application, once this was discovered, on the 18th of September last, for Mr. Thangamani to be nominated as the DPS. And what happened at that point was that your licensing authority, I'm going to paraphrase a little here, but they said there was an objection from the police, and they said, do you want to reconsider this application? Do you maybe want to withdraw it? And there was no response from the agent. And then your licensing authority, acting in its administrative capacity, I might add, then thought, well, they don't want to press ahead with the application, but there was no indication one way or the other. And again, there's no criticism there. I think the agent, I think quite properly, could have responded to that email and didn't. So then what happens is this application goes in on the 27th of January to nominate Mr. Thangamani as the DPS, and that was objected to by the Met the following day, and that's why we find ourselves here today, because, as you will know, Chair, and as your member colleagues will know, that it's only the police that can object to a DPS variation. This isn't perhaps strictly a DPS variation, but it's a nomination of a DPS on the basis of the prevention of crime and disorder licensing objective being likely to be undermined by the granting of such an application. So that's where we find ourselves here. And so clearly it's quite proper that the Met are here, and that's why you don't find any other responsible authorities here. So this is simply down to your determination, I would respectfully suggest, as to whether the licensing objective of the prevention of crime and disorder is likely to be undermined by you granting this application today. It's no state secret, and that there is a lack of, respectfully would suggest, a lack of particulars in the police objections. But I'm trying to second guess here that this relates to a visit that was undertaken at the premises that involved, was shortly after the license was granted to Mr. Thangamani. One of the conditions on the license, I just invite you to turn to page 20 in your agenda pack. I'll give you all a second to do that.
Sorry, could you repeat the page number?
20, Chair. It's the conditions on the premises license.
Councillor Sumner, do you have them?
Sorry,
Bear with me.
I keep forgetting.
Yeah, I've got him. I've got him.
Yeah, thank
We get so used to now reading people's, but very well, thank you, Chair. So position is there's condition 9 there. Mr. Thirakaran was the previous license holder. I don't think I'm going to be sued for slander here when I'm not that I could be in my professional capacity, but he was a wholly unsuitable license holder, and I think it's right to say your licensing authority and the Met were glad to see the back of him. And there's a condition there that says he's not permitted to conduct any business for and on behalf of Hanwell News. And this is the key thing. I do have to question the legality of this actually, but look, it is a condition on there. And he's not to be inside the shop area or storerooms of Hanwell News, 116 Uxbridge Road, Hanwell. And I think it's right to say the force of that condition probably speaks to the concerns that you as a licensing authority about that individual. And there's no question that condition is on the license. It's not been appealed, wasn't appealed at the time. So I'm not going to seek to make any particularly clever legal points on that. And it's right that Mr. Thangamani concedes he misapprehended that condition, but he as the license holder is responsible for that condition. There's no question he's not seeking to step away from his responsibilities there, and he's made an error. What happened was simply this: he'd had the shop a few days. There was an issue. There's a little bit of irony to this. If I also ask you to look on the same page at condition 5, quite a frequent condition. This section 137 of the Licensing Act makes it an offence to display alcohol for sale unless an authorization is in place. And so I'm sure we've all popped into supermarkets at a certain time, and they've got shutters on the fridges, which is there to cover the alcohol up. In fact, there's a Tesco's near me that I know doesn't have shutters and has alcohol on display outside its permitted hours, which is astonishing, really, when you think about an organisation of that size. But that's why those shutters are there, and that's what that condition is for, condition 5. And the issue that Mr. Thangamani had simply was that shutter would not close. It was and you may have questions for him about the logistics of that, but it wouldn't close, and so he asked for Mr. Thangamani to come down and sort it out, and that was when the visit took place. And clearly you'll have questions for that, but the points I would raise in respect of that are threefold. First of all, whilst it was unfortunate, it was some significant time ago. It's looking at nine months now, perhaps creeping up towards 10. Will was Mr. Thangamani had just taken the premises on. He was perhaps a little overwhelmed with one or two things involved in it. I think because he said that to me, but he's in a very different position now. I can hear some echoing here. Is that just me?
No, I think what's happened is Nigel is managing to log in. Just bear with us.
Can't hear you, Chair. I can't hear you.
What's happened?
Nigel,
Nigel,
you hang up your phone now, please. Nigel, hang your phone.
I've unplugged my phone.
Yeah,
You're still showing as being connected with your phone, Mr.
turn
Councillor
off the
Simon.
microphone.
You've got to disconnect the call.
Disconnect
Where do I
the
disconnect?
phone, please?
The big red button.
Big red button. Okay, big red button.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Craig. I'm not entirely sure at what point you're at when we started getting the feedback, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to make. I'm in the dark a little bit here because I'm speculating to a certain extent about this, but I assume that what the police objections relate to, and perhaps if they don't, I would appreciate some form of comeback. Actually, if the police want to expand upon the objections, but I was going to make 3 points about that visit. The first was it was a considerable time ago. And the second point I was going to make in association with that is, as I understand it from Mr. Thangamani, Bob Deere, who your licensing officer, who I have had many dealings with, who I know, I believe, I think it's fair to say, is probably busier than any other licensing officer in the country, actually, with site visits. I know you have a number of problems in Ealing as a borough, particularly with illicit products, and so I know he's extremely busy. Is Mr. Deere, and he's a licensing officer I have a lot of regard for as well. I understand he's been back about 4 times since, and there've been no issues. And so the point I'm going to make is we are dealing with this application today, not what took place in May. That doesn't mean you can't take that into account. Of course you can, and it's absolutely proper that you do. But equally, you're dealing with the application as it stands now. And so with those 2 factors in mind, the third factor I would just invite you to consider is the crime and disorder licensing objective. That's what we're here to evaluate, is whether this application, based on the amount of time that's passed, the fact that there's been no evidence of it recurring, or there being any other significant issues with these premises, just invite you to consider how the licensing objective of the prevention of crime and disorder is going to be materially on the balance of probabilities. So you have to be absolutely sure that it won't be, but on the balance of probabilities, well, it's going to be materially affected by you granting this application, given the amount of time that's passed. And I say that in particular because the Section 182 guidance is abundantly clear on this point. If I could just, I don't know if you have it before you, and if you don't, I'm happy to read it into the record. It's at page 27, and it's under paragraph 4.39 in the Section 182 guidance. And I think it's right that I read, there's 3 paragraphs here. It'll take me a couple of minutes, but I think it's right that I read it all quite properly into the record. The police may object to the designation of a new DPS where, in exceptional circumstances, they believe that the appointment would undermine the crime prevention objective. The police can object where, for example, a DPS is first specified in relation to a particular premises, and the specification of that DPS in relation to the particular premises gives rise to exceptional concerns. For example, where a personal license holder has been allowed by the courts to retain their license. We're not dealing with this here, but I'm just reading the whole narrative out. Despite convictions for selling alcohol to children. Well, I'm just going to butt in now. Of course, that would be one such example. And then transfers premises into premises known for underage drinking. Next paragraph goes on to say, where the police do object, the licensing authority must arrange for a hearing which the issue can be considered and both parties can put forward their arguments, which is why we're here now. The 2003 Act provides that the applicant may apply for an individual to take up a post as DPS immediately. And in such cases, the issue would be whether the individual should be removed from that post. The licensing authority considering this matter must restrict its consideration to the issue of crime and disorder and give comprehensive reasons for its decision. Either party will be entitled to appeal if their argument is rejected. This is key to the point I'm making, the final paragraph. The portability of personal licenses between premises is an important concept under the 2003 Act. It is expected that police objections would arise only in genuinely exceptional circumstances. It then goes on to talk about whether police are routinely objecting. I'm not for a second going to suggest that's happening here. So what the police are tasked with today is demonstrating to you, first of all, that the application, if it's granted, would be likely to undermine the crime prevention licensing objective, and do so in a way that is significant and meaningful, given the narrative behind the ethos of how this application process is supposed to be dealt with. They're also going to demonstrate to you that these are genuinely exceptional circumstances, and as things stand, I don't fail to see how that's the case. This is a man of good character, and when I say that, I mean he has no criminal convictions, cautions, reprimands, or warnings. He's 23 years of age. He has a job, although in the course of the last few months, that job, he's working from home, and so I've discussed with him about his responsibilities as DPS, and certainly he's a frequent visitor to the shop. He has a responsible job. This isn't just some wide boy who's rocked up in a Cadillac who has a string of criminal convictions. And so the point I'm going to finish on is this. This part of the License Act, this process is there to deal with certain situations that are novel or unusual or particularly perhaps gratuitous in some way. I deal with I think it's fair to say, probably as many licensing hearings as any other lawyer in the country. I deal probably with 2 or 3 hearings a week. I do 2 of these a year, tops, 2 of these DPS variations. So that gives you an idea of how they are treated and should be treated. And so I just make that point that in these circumstances, there aren't any exceptional, and certainly no truly exceptional or genuinely exceptional circumstances. This is a man who's had this shop for some time. Yes, he had some issues at the beginning. He's holding his hands up to that. He's not seeking to sidestep that in any way. But a lot has happened, I think we'll all agree, since last May. An awful lot has happened since last May in this country. He has been subject to a number of compliance visits. I'm certain if any of those had thrown up, and I'm sure the Met have been in as well, I'd be surprised if they hadn't, and it's quite right that they do. If any of those visits had thrown up any issues, that evidence would be before you today, and it isn't. And so for all those reasons, particularly given the what the guidance guides you to do, I was going to say instructs you, at the end of the day, it's your decision, but the guidance is there to steer us all at the end of the day. For all those reasons, but then I would invite you to grant the application. And that's the application, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. Unless anybody's got some procedural observations or comments, I'll go on to invite questions to applicant from the police. Officer, is it Hewison or James that'd like to go? Unmute your mic, please. Well done, Vicky. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd just like to say, obviously, we've already heard that the premises licence was granted to Mr. Thangamani on the 6th of May.
Mr. Craig, would you like to mute your mic as well, please? That's okay. All right, go ahead, Vicky.
6th of May 2020. Once the licence was granted, police and the licensing authority did make some visits. Some breaches were identified, and the premises licence, in which Mr. Thangamani was the premises licence holder, was revoked on the 16th of September 2020. A hearing has been listed at Uxbridge Magistrates Court on the 1st of March 2020 for the appeal hearing. That's been listed. On the 18th of September 2020, police received an application to transfer the DPS to Mr. Thangamani. An objection to the transfer was submitted to the local authority, who informed Mr. Panchal, the licensing agent. It was their understanding that this was accepted and the application withdrawn. A visit was carried out by PC Brown and PC Butler, who are licensing officers. That was on the 26th of January. Mrs. Thiva Karan was working in the premise. The shop predominantly had alcohol on sale and was displayed in the shop window and on the shelves behind the till area. The fridges were full of bottles and cans of beer and cider. She was told that with no DPS on the licence, the alcohol could not be sold. Mrs. Thira Karan lowered all of the shutters covering the alcohol. She then called Mr. Thangamani on the phone, and a discussion was had with Bob Deere about whether there was a DPS or not. Mr. Thangamani was advised to speak with his agent, Mr. Panchal. Mrs. Thira Karan told PC Brown that Mr. Thangamani is her boss and that he comes into the shop occasionally for short periods at a time, simply to check on them. On the 27th of January, sorry, just bear with me. On the 27th of January, police received another application to transfer the DPS to Mr. Thangamani. This again was objected to on the basis that Mr. Thangamani was the PLH of the premises when there were numerous breaches to the premises licence. One of the breaches was selling alcohol without a DPS on the premises licence. Due to these breaches and Mr. Thangamani's lack of understanding and control of running a licensed premise, the premises licence was revoked on the 16th of September 2020. I know Mr. Bob Deere visited the premises the day before on the 15th of September and witnessed a sale of alcohol. It is a mandatory condition under the Licensing Act to have a DPS where there is a supply of alcohol. It's an important role and can be described as someone who is normally in day-to-day control of the business and is a single point of accountability for any issues. According to Mrs. Thirakavan, Mr. Thangamani only comes into the shop occasionally for short periods at a time, simply to check on them. In the periods when there has not been a DPS, Mr. Thangamani has been the only named person on the licence as the premises licence holder. I would argue that not only has he allowed the breaches to happen, he has not had day-to-day control of the business. And I would like to ask Mr. Thangamani, how much of the day-to-day running of the business does he intend to have?
Okay, I'm glad, just bear with me. Now, Mr. Craig, you did say in your
That's the biggest question I've ever heard, actually.
Well, yeah, I was just about to say, go to Vicky and say, do you have any questions for the applicant? So, Mr. Craig, you did invite us specifically if we had any questions in logistics towards the applicant. So
yes, but Chair, that's fine, Chair. But I feel I need to.
I'm going to ask Vicky, PC Hewitton, to perhaps rephrase a question just briefly about the last part. If you'd like to repeat that, please.
How much of the day-to-day running of the business does Mr. Thangamani intend to have?
Well, certainly I will let Mr. Thangamani answer that, but can I just that Vicky's raised a point in there that I feel I need to address, because I feel I need to address it. An application was submitted on the 18th of the 9th, 20 for Mr. Thangamani to be the DPS. It was properly submitted. The police objected to it. It should have been listed for a hearing and it wasn't. That is not the fault of Mr. Thangamani. And certainly if I was advising and I was instructed to advise anybody in relation to that, as to whether any offence had been committed following that application being submitted, my answer to that would be absolutely not. No offence has been committed, because an application for a variation of a DPS has gone in properly. It's not been rejected as being for example, not one of the boxes isn't ticked or it's illegible, the police have objected. It was then down to the licensing authority to list that for a hearing. That is a simple process. And so as far as I'm concerned, if I was advising somebody on that, I would say you were the DPS from the 18th of the 9th, 20. Now, personal license courses have taken it upon themselves to do it again because they just don't want to get into an argument about that or a fight. But Mr. Thangamani, as far as I'm concerned, and I would give this advice to any applicant, was the DPS from the 18th of the 9th, 20. And simply by virtue of the fact that the licensing authority have not dealt with it in the way that I would feel arguably they should, that is not his fault. He's complied with the requirement, and as we all know, a DPS variation takes effect immediately upon its submission and takes and one of the crazy things about the way the DPS situation works is, and I've been in this situation in the last year, so you apply for someone to be a DPS and they go on immediately, irrespective, whatever happens. The police then object. There's then a hearing. If at that hearing the application is refused, that person stays on as a DPS for 21 days until the appeal period is ended. And if they appeal in that 21 days, they stay on as a DPS ad infinitum until the appeal is determined. So that, I think it's a bit of a crazy system myself. I understand why it's there, but that's the way the system is. So as far as I'm concerned, there was no unauthorized sale when they visited the premises on the 26th of January because Mr. Thangamani was the DPS at that point in time. And I would be absolutely supremely confident, never been accused of lacking confidence, but I'm not reckless and I'm not wild. If I was walking into a court having to run that argument, I would be supremely confident at winning that argument. So I don't believe it's right to castigate Mr. Thangamani for what went on in January, because he, as far as I'm concerned, was the DPS. But I will now let him answer the question about his involvement in the business, because it's quite proper that he answers it and not me. So Mr. Thangamani, if I may.
Yes, I'm here. Yep.
Chair, can I just ask if Mr. Thangamani would put himself on video for when he's answering questions?
Do I have to put my video?
Well, can I? So, well, I don't believe you do, sir, but we would like to, I would prefer to know who the gentleman, who the applicant is. I mean, you could be anybody. I mean, I can see your name, I can see your photo, but I don't know who's there.
Okay, well, you gotta give me a moment. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Just give me a sec.
In fairness, Chair, I'm not saying this is the case with Mr. Thangamani, but I did conduct my first Crown Court hearing, which wasn't. It was simply over the phone because it was in the early days, and I wasn't. I think it's fair to say I wasn't suitably dressed at the time, and it may well be. Chair, you're on mute.
We've all been on a learning curve over the last few months.
And of course, Chair, we've done this a few times, and
yeah. But Mr. Thangamani, I understand he's working from home in a professional capacity, so must be.
It's also, Chair, not the first of these hearings that Mr. Thangamani's attended.
Thank you.
That's a good point, Councillor. Forgive me.
Right, so I'm trying to put it on, say something along the lines of privacy. Just a second.
Can you see us, Mr. Thangamani?
There should be an icon at the bottom, Mr. Thangamani, that says "Start Video." It's at the bottom bar, and it's sort of 90% of the way across on the left. It's got a camera symbol.
Can you guys hear me, or is it still not?
That's excellent, Mr. Thangamani. You're as
Hear me,
yeah,
yeah?
thank you. You're in. We can hear you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Because
Yeah.
eventually, me out.
You
Okay.
also look like the guy. Just bear in mind that when you're not speaking, to try and mute your mic. So it's probably best to have your finger hovering over the microphone button. So, Mr. Craig, I suppose you want to sort of, I wouldn't say coach, but rephrase the question on behalf of PC Hewison.
I'm very glad you clarified that, Chair. So, Ms. Thangamani, simply, obviously, you might wish to answer this question two ways. First of all, your understanding of what the responsibility of the DPS are and what your involvement, physical and practical, has been in the business and will be going forward, and whether there's been any change in the last 10 months, 9 months, and whether you envisage any changes going forward. I think that probably covers everything off.
Yeah, so yeah, sure, can certainly answer that. Okay, you know, of course, I know the issues we had with Mr. Tivakaran, and I do not, you know, have any contact with him anymore, and I wanted to, you know, make sure he does not have access to the shop at all. So I've made a plan, I could say, where I blocked the back entrance. So I've already, you know, got permission to construct that and everything. I'm just waiting, you know, for this hearing to finish and get a proper answer so I can continue, you know, with my ideas. But I wanted to initially block the back entrance just to be on the safe side, to make sure no one has access to it, because until now I don't know if there's any other ways of you know, getting, because the back gate only has one key, but now if I can go with the plan, that means there will be 2 ways, and both ways, but both of them will have different locks and everything. That means there's no way he can get into it. And I'm also planning to extend the shop, you know, just
Right, Mr. Thangamani, can I just cut across you?
Yeah, sure.
It's important that you confine yourself to the question that's been asked. Do you want me to ask it again?
Yeah, I mean, more than happy to hear that. It's just you're lagging.
Your involvement in the shop.
Ah, okay, I can hear you. Okay, I can understand.
Oh,
Yeah, my involvement.
Right, okay, well, that's my fault. Apologies for that.
No,
so need to understand. So let me ask the question again, because it's important that you answer the question that's been put to you by Vicky Hewson. First of all, what is your understanding of the role of a DPS? What is your involvement in the shop? What has it been? What is it? Your camera's gone off.
I think does the back itself.
Okay.
Can you?
Yeah, no, you're back. You're back.
I don't know why it does.
What's your involvement in the shop? You know, physically, practically, in terms of your involvement in it. What has that been in the past? Has that changed? Is that likely to change in the future? So, just tell us about your. Forget about sorry, Mr. Tivakaran for now. Just deal. There may be a question about that. Just deal with your involvement in the shop and in the context of your role as a DPS.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you know, it's going to take my camera off again. I'm not sure why. Are you still able to see me?
No, we don't. But go on. You're okay.
Carry on.
Yeah, you can.
I'm not sure why it does that. Okay, anyways, I know I'm completely aware of the licensing objective. If that's, you know, the question you're asking me, Mr. Craig, you know, I've done, you know, everything I need to do in that terms. But my involvement definitely would now mean I would tend so last week itself, I was actually there 3 times. I went to check up on everything, and then I even went to check up the back, like I explained to you earlier. But of course, but that didn't really matter. But now I'm definitely aware of everything, and I will protect everything. I am aware of the licensing objectives. So, you know, the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of you know, public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. So my involvement definitely would involve now me being, you know, in the business much more than before. So, you know, that's really, yeah.
Is there any way that you can monitor the shop, or I mean, what oversight do you have when you're not there?
Perfect question. Yeah. So basically, so the CCTV, I have actually, so, you know, I'm on the process of changing the system, but I've already got it on my mobile phone. I literally view everything on my phone, you know, even when I'm, doing whilst I'm working from home, I always have my phone on the side where I've monitored the shop, and from that sort of looking from there, I have actually, done a lot of things. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Okay. And how have your circumstances, perhaps your wider circumstances, changed since last May that might mean you've got more time to spend at the shop, or you're more capable of spending more time at the shop?
Would you mean second? I think you can see me now.
In terms of your job, your other job, you've obviously got a job.
Yeah.
Frank, I don't think that's in dispute.
Yeah, I mean, as you guys are aware, I do work at Metrobank, and I was in the process. I was actually in discussion with them. They're already aware of me having a shop and everything, and I was telling them in the near future I am looking to quit so I can put my full focus on the shop. But that's the period where I got promoted to I went from a business advisor to a business level expert. But with that, I could work 2 days working from home, and the rest I could focus myself on the shop. So that's the near future plan. If hopefully everything goes to plan, that's what's going to happen.
Okay. Chair, I think he's probably covered everything off, but if you've got any follow-up questions, your microphone, Chair.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. Councillor Harrison, not Councillor, Officer Harrison, did you want to explore some themes there again? I mean, this is the part where I invite questions to the applicant from the police, objectors and councillors. So I just want to go through the police questions at this point.
Yeah, can I just ask what previous experience of a DPS has Mr. Thangamani had before?
This question to me, yeah?
Yes.
Correct, Mr. If possible, I want an interface between Officer Harrison and yourself, and Mr. Craig will intervene if he feels he needs to.
Okay. In terms of previous experience, when I was about 18, I used to actually work in an off-license myself. That was actually my part-time. So that's where I learned everything. And that is experience I actually tried to put into use. In other words, that's the experience I gained to be able to work at, do everything from there to handle.
How long was that for, Mr. Thangamani?
So this was a good 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, this was just before I entered university. So yeah, a good 6-7 months. Yeah.
So just to confirm, this is the first premise that you would be the DPS for. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And one more question I'd like to ask is, why did you not apply to be the DPS when you applied for the premises license originally?
I think I've already answered that, which is he'd done the course, he just didn't physically have the license, so because there wasn't a number, it didn't go on the application. And it's right to say Mr. Thangamani assumed that the agent would deal with that, and the agent didn't. So that's why it was missed off in the first place. It was simply at the time the application was submitted, his personal license application was pending.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for confirming that. Thank you. I've got no further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Officer James.
Hello, good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Can I just ask one question? On the licence, under condition 9, it says there's an extra bit on there where it says the additional condition that the applicant is to provide documentation to the Ealing Council licensing team showing that the lease for the premises has been transferred into his name within 3 months. Has that been done? Do we know?
I asked. Sorry, forgive me. Sorry. I asked that question this morning, so well, I'm glad I anticipated that. And the answer was that the agent, Mr. Panchal, has been instructed to do that. I have been unable to contact Mr. Panchal, so I can't confirm that one way or the other. But that was his answer, that Mr. Panchal had done it, and or was doing it, or was it? No, I've got to be fair here, have been instructed to do it, but I've not been able to get through to him. So I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
Angela, are you there, or Alison? Are you able to?
Yeah. I can confirm that we haven't had any paperwork or any documents regarding that lease up until.
Have you had correspondence?
We've not heard anything from Mr. Panchal from when we sent that email regarding the first DPS variation that Mr. Craig referred to. That was made on the 18th of September when we sent an email saying that there'd been a police objection. What would they like to do next? We hadn't heard anything from the agent. We made a call the next day and we were told by the agent that if you don't hear anything by close of play, then that application is to be withdrawn, and that's why it was marked withdrawn. We've not had any other correspondence whatsoever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would say that's a resounding no.
I would say it's a likely no, Chair.
I can only act on the evidence.
No, of course, and I'm not going to take a huge point on that. I think
yeah, maybe resounding was perhaps too strong, but
I think it's fair to say, on balance, I think it's certainly likely that hasn't been done. I don't know the reasons behind that. My client has instructed the agent. I don't know what the reasons are, so I can't take it any further than that. I would just make the point that silence is not acceptance, and it's simply that isn't part of the process. I'm sorry, can't just say, well, if we don't hear back from you, we'll take it as withdrawn. That's someone has applied for a DPS variation, has paid the fee, and the process should have been followed. Look, I'm not making a huge point here. I've had a lot of dealings with Ealing as an authority. They are a very efficient authority. These things do happen, but I do think on this occasion, what should have happened is it should have just gone to a hearing, and it's as simple as that. But look, I'm certainly not criticising your licensing authority. I think they're very good. So,
okay.
No.
Harry, did you have anything else?
No, not at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. That to go. We don't have any other responsible authority, so. Councillors Sumner or Donnelly, do you have any questions for the applicant? I don't mind who goes first.
For my part, I have no question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. It's partly because I sat on the two previous panels for this, so I am either I either have the advantage or disadvantage of previous knowledge, depending on your point of view. Can I just clarify, for, as things stand, Mr. Tangamani, what's your home address?
So you want my home address?
Yeah, well, where do you, I don't mean necessarily your street and number, but where do you live?
I live in Ilford.
Ilford.
Ah,
oh, okay.
Okay.
So just for purposes of understanding the ease with which you can conduct day-to-day operations of the shop. So one of the things that was noted in the findings and the determination of the panel in September was that you had indicated to us that your priority was your job at Metrobank. Are you saying that that is now no longer your priority?
Yes, I have to accept that statement. Yeah, my priorities have changed now. Yeah.
Okay. You say to us that you, well, I think Mr. Craig indicated that you now no longer have dealings with Mr. Tivakaram. As Mr. Craig has come to see, Mr. Tivakaram has been a bit of a spectre over the all the proceedings relating to these premises, not just the shop, but the flat above the shop, where, as I understand it, Mr. and Mrs. Tivakaram still reside. So in advance of the hearing in May, we were told that you didn't know Mr. Tivakaram. And one of the issues that we had, I think, was to discover that within a very short time of you taking over the premises, Mr. Tivakaram had been called in by you to give advice. But you say that you now have no dealings. Are you saying you have no dealings with Mr. Tivakaram now?
No, not at all. No.
Okay. Who works in the shop when you
Yeah.
are not there?
So when I'm not there, a great colleague named Ophelia works there, and then at the moment, Mrs. Tivakaram is also working there, but due to COVID and following the guidelines, I'm not able to get anyone else in. So I'm just waiting, once the restrictions are slightly lifted, so I can get a few others to work in. And I've already got people there. I'm just, waiting for everything to go by paper.
So Mrs. Tivakaram remains an employee of the shop in February of 2021.
So the latest, so what she informed to me was, she informed to me that they are looking to move out of London completely. That's what she informed to me. So she said she'll give me a heads up, and when she does give me a heads up, which could be within the next coming months, but she said if she does give me a heads up, I've already got people ready to bring in.
Okay, obviously I don't want to make reference to matters which are the subject of appeal to other authority, but clearly Mrs. Tivakaram's conduct was a key part of the evidence provided to the hearing in September. What actions have you taken since September regarding Mrs. Tivakaram's qualifications and suitability to operate as the sole person in charge of the licensed premises?
What do you mean sole person?
Well, Mrs. Tivakaram was, shall we say, Mrs. Tivakaram, it was alleged, had sold alcohol at times and in ways which were outside of the scope of your license. Mrs. Tivakaram was unable to provide to the police licensing authorities of the previous panel through you video evidence that would have been helpful to the proceedings of that panel. What further training has Mrs. Tivakaram had that would make her more suitable than appeared to be the case when the panel deliberated in September?
Okay.
I think
Chair, I think Mr. Tanganami was just about to answer me.
No, go ahead, Chair. Go ahead.
Well, talk to us about Mrs. Tivakaram.
Could I just butt in here? You might want to just address also. I'm struggling to. You mentioned the other member of staff.
Hang on. Sorry, I apologise to Councillor Donnelly because he asked a question. I'd like Mr. Tanganami to answer that, please.
I'm simply trying to assist the hearing because there's another member of staff there who Mr. Thangamani may be able to touch on as well, that may go some way to answering the question. That's all. I'm just trying to.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I previously mentioned that Ophelia, who's actually a personal license holder, she works in there. She's got all the experience. In fact, she's actually taught me with a few things. She's actually helped out Mrs. Tivakaram a lot by helping her out and training her. And she's a great asset to the place, and she's the one that's been helping Mrs. Tivakaram out.
And in terms of the training, what have you? So the question the council asked you was in relation to Mrs. Tivakaram. So what progress have you made, either through yourself or through Ophelia, in terms of making sure that she's better than she was, shall we say?
Yeah. So Mr. Panchal does this licensing course. as you're aware of, selling alcohol and all of that. She has already attended one of the courses, and because of COVID, you cannot attend those directly face to face, so you'd have to do it over Zoom. We're trying to allocate a proper slot for that, for her to attend the second one, where they do the exams and everything. So this
when did she do the first one?
She did the first one. I don't have the exact date.
Roughly month.
Some back.
This year, was it last year?
It was around last year, towards the end of last year.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it was just basically last year towards the end.
Okay, and following up, I got one more. Just to touch on this issue of the transfer of the lease. Again, this was a matter which was of sufficient significance to be referred to in the findings of the panel in September. So again, I'm slightly surprised that your interest in this didn't proceed as far as to ensure that Mr. Panchal had carried out the instructions that you gave him. Why was that? Why didn't you ensure that the documentation was transferred in the way that had been decreed?
What do you mean? As in, are you asking?
Well, we've been told that an instruction was given that proof of the transfer be provided to Ealing Council. It appears to be admitted that such documentation was not transferred. We're told that Mr. Panchal had been instructed to do that. Okay, I accept that. And the inference, therefore, is that he did not do it. What I'm surprised at is that you didn't follow up to ensure that it was done.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I didn't know it wasn't done till you guys mentioned. I mean, I spoke to Duncan earlier today, and that's when he mentioned it still wasn't done. So that's all I could say. I mean, I wasn't aware of that. It hasn't been done. I thought it was done. But yeah, go ahead.
Just quickly, I mean, these things cost money, so I mean, you must, you're taking over a business. Why did you not see that you were taking over a business?
Okay, but look at it from my point of view, right? I'm a 23-year-old, trying to step into a new, this is something completely new to me. And coming into stuff like this, working, monitoring everything, I can't get everything onto my head because my route is not clear for me to, progress. There's always obstacles coming. And in other words, I feel like, there's people trying to put me down, in other words. So, with all of this stuff, it's been quite hard for me to progress and get everything out the way. Now, for example, with the premises license, that was the hardest bit. And then you're telling me about the transfer of the tenancy. I personally thought with the lease, I've already informed Mr. Panchal to do that. He already told me, I've got this and this, that. That's why I'm paying the funds for. But today I was aware of that. And then of course, that will have to be separate, but yeah, I'll get that. So yeah.
Okay.
I've no further questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly.
Can I just clarify? I think it's been conceded as likely rather than outrightly conceded.
Sure. Fine. I mean, there could be a document somewhere. There could be.
I think it's unlikely, to be fair, but I'll just make that point.
I withdraw the word admitted for that purpose then.
I'm very grateful, Councillor. Thank you.
So if you've got page 20, Kershan, these agreed conditions on the 20th of May, but they all seem fairly straightforward. But you mentioned the license and objectives, but these are the things that ensure, well, go to, you know, promoting the lighting objectives. I mean, why do you think there should be no stock above 6% in the shop, and why there should be no sale of single cans, spirit mixtures at the premises? Why do you think that was asked for?
That's a question for you, Mr. Thangamani. I can't answer that for you.
Oh, my bad. Okay, so are you asking me why we are selling, why we can't sell any stock above 6%, and you're asking me why I can't sell single can?
Well, what are the reasons for those conditions?
You're asking me what the reasons are?
Yeah.
Why are they there?
Yeah,
I
but,
mean, you agree to them.
because we've already, you know, according to you, of course, everything was breached as it was, and then on top of that, you know, with the cover and everything. But yeah, with everything being breached, that's the only reason. Well, one of the main reasons this has, you know, all of this has been put in as a condition.
Well,
I'll ask one more time. Very important here. This is very, very critical. Why do you think your shop will not be selling miniatures and beers above 6%?
Because it's been banned now.
Okay.
Okay,
That's fine. I don't want that. I've asked him a direct question. He's given his answer. So I don't want to.
Chair, I feel that you can draw what conclusions you can from this, and if you think I'm leading him in any way, but I think it's right that I asked the question in this way.
Okay, fine.
May have misapprehended it slightly. Why do you think those conditions exist generally, not just in terms of your shop? What is the purpose of those conditions?
Oh, okay. So I mean, if for example, if it's single can, what? So yeah, the question. My bad if I'm asking that again, but the question, from my understanding, is why am I not allowed to sell a single can, and why do I have to sell 2 cans? Is that correct? For example.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question was
well, it's the same. It's the same question with regards to why can't you sell high strength beer?
Okay.
It's the same question. What is the purpose of those conditions? Why are they there? What are they seeking to achieve? Forget what's gone on before. Let's just forget what's good. Let's just say you took this shop and it was a brand new license and it hadn't even been a shop before. Why? What is the purpose of those conditions? What purpose are they serving?
I mean, you know, it's the safety and safety of the public and everything. That's what I mentioned from the licensing objective. I thought that's what, you know, everything pops into this.
You got your answer, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me go on now. Just to confirm, nothing from Councillor Sumner. We've got no objectors here. So really, I would like to move on to representations. I know we briefly had representations from the police. Invite responsible authorities to, yeah, please, would you like to make your representation?
Thank you, Chair. As I've said before, police did visit the premises very recently on the 26th of January 2021 and spoke to Mrs. Tivikaran, who said that Mr. Thangamani is a boss and that he comes into the shop occasionally for short periods of time simply just to check on them. The police aren't confident that Mr. Thangamani is involved in the day-to-day running of the business enough and that he lacks understanding of running a licensed premise. Should Mr. Thangamani be the DPS of the premise, the police are not confident that the licensing objectives would be promoted. That's it for me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, you're on.
You're muted, Chair.
Yeah, yeah, really, for you to make representations now, Mr. Craig. To respond to any.
Yes, questions, you mean, Chair? Yes.
Yes.
Well, this principally, what is truly exceptional about this application?
This is to the police.
To the police, yes. Sorry. Well, that's what I presumed.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Mr. Thangy is the premises licence holder. It was only a premises licence holder for a few months when the licence was revoked, and in that time there were breaches. And there was no DPS. He wasn't the DPS. Obviously, you've explained the reason why that was, but there was no other nominated DPS. And I feel that he has a lack of understanding of running a licensed premises. And we just don't have any confidence that he will be able to promote the licence and objectives.
What breaches have there been since the licence was revoked? I mean, other than the DPS, I've addressed that point. Okay, so that's for the panel to decide on that. But other than that, what other breaches have there been that you're aware of since the licence was revoked?
Since the licence was revoked, as far as I'm aware, there have been none.
Thank you. No more questions, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we go to deliberations now. So
I've got a question, Chair.
go ahead, Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah. PC Hewson, when the visit was made, was there any other member of staff present other than Mrs. Tivikaram?
The most recent one on the 26th of January.
Yes.
It was just Mrs. Tivikaram.
Thank you.
Yes, go to summing up now, I believe. I don't have any questions. So, Vicky, you've gone, so to speak. So it's Mr. Craig.
Yeah, look, I've not got a huge amount to say. I'm sure everyone will be delighted to hear. Just simply, truly exceptional. You need to be of the view that these are truly exceptional circumstances. The guidance is clear on that, and I'm grateful, and I'm very grateful for the straight answer I got. That there haven't been any issues since the license was revoked. Mr. Thangamani, he I think he got there in the end with the question. I think some people are better suited to dealing with these situations than others, but what you're principally dealing with here is these are premises that it would appear, based on what the police have said, and certainly from the visits from Bob Deere, that are running themselves properly now. You're not here to say, is this guy perfect? Is this guy the greatest DPS in the history of since the Licensing Act was enacted? Good God, 16 years ago. What you're here to do is say, are there truly exceptional circumstances that lead you to the conclusion that the crime and disorder licensing objective will be materially undermined by the granting of this application? Well, the fact that there have been no issues in the last 4 or 5 months would suggest that it wouldn't be. And so for that reason, I would invite you to grant the application. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. I don't think any more contributions from anybody else. The time now is 10 to 12. So I would suggest that we all come back. We'll go and deliberate. So you'll all be, in a sense, thrown out of the room, and then you'll be invited back into the room. I would expect Cornelia to invite you in at around 12:25. So that'd be sort of the time you can come back, not before. Obviously, we reserve the right to take longer should we require it. So you'll all be invited back at 12:25.
Chair, if you don't mind, it's Cornelia here. Just to say, there would be no way of me inviting you all again other than just to send you another email. So you already have the details. So if you just come into the meeting as before, and I'll admit you into the room.
That's useful, Cornelia. Yeah, you won't get an invite, but knock on the door and Cornelia will let you in from about 12:25.
Great.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.